Hello and welcome to Intersection, where people, ideas, and issues come together on KBIA radio and on the web. I'm Ruben Stern. Over the past year, there has been a lot of discussion related to law enforcement in Columbia. Taser use, gun-related crimes, racial profiling, resource officers in the public schools, and the creation of a citizen review board to monitor police conduct. These issues point to a larger question: what sort of relationship should exist between the police and the citizens in our community? We also keep hearing the phrase community policing. What is good community policing, and how does community policing play into that larger question of how the citizens and police are getting along? Our guests in the studio today have some thoughts on the subject, and we imagine you do too. What does community policing mean to you, and how are the police doing in your neighborhood? I'm joined in the studio today by the new Chief of Police in Columbia, Ken Burton. Chief Burton, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me.
Also in our studio with us today is Nathan Stevens. Nathan is the director of MU's Black Culture Center. He grew up here in the First Ward and helped create the First Ward Ambassadors and the Youth Empowerment Zone. He was also on the city's selection committee for the new police chief. Welcome, Nathan.
Thank you.
And our third panelist today is Richard Gray. Richard coordinates the city's Neighborhood Watch program and its 4,000 neighborhood volunteers. He also edits the Crime Watch newsletter. Thanks for joining us, Richard.
Most welcome. Thank you for the invitation.
We're glad to have all three of you here today. And you are able to join our discussion as well. Those of you watching, what does the new police chief need to have on his to-do list to best enable our community and the police to work together? Join us online at kbiaintersection.wordpress.com or email your thoughts to intersection@kbia.gmail.com. Chief Burton, let's begin with you. What does it mean when people say community policing, and how is that working here in Columbia?
Community policing is kind of a unique thing in that if you ask 10 police chiefs across the country, you'll get 10 different definitions. I think that there are pretty glowing examples of community policing. The Crime Watch relationship is strong here in Columbia, and that's an element. But I think more importantly, it's the police understanding of situations and neighborhood issues from the citizen's perspective, and then using the resources that are made available to us to address issues of concern to them. Many times police executives go out and address what they think the public is wanting us to work on, and we pat ourselves on the back, and we're surprised a lot of times when we tell the community what a great job we did, and they said, you know, that you did a great job in that area, but what we really rather have you doing is working on this topic. Mm-hmm. So it's important that we create that dialogue, and I think that's the beginning of a community policing relationship. So there are spots all over the city where we have relationships like that, and we intend to improve in that area.
Nathan, you've done a lot of community organizing in Columbia. What would you say is in place at this point to bridge that knowledge gap between what the citizens want from their police department and what the police department is doing?
Well, I think there are a number of things in place currently. First of all, we have a new chief in place, and he's open to hearing citizens' concerns and that type of thing. Interim Chief Dresner did an excellent job of communicating to the Columbia community in a number of manners, online blogs, come and sit and talk, phone conversations. And I think the main thing is just having that communication available. The other thing is the new professional standards unit, the Citizens Review Board. Those are things that I think will enhance the community and police relationships in the city of Columbia.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Richard, you've been involved in the Neighborhood Watch programs. How do those programs help the police department in terms of getting information about what needs to be done back to the police?
Well, that's a good question. Neighborhood Watch was first organized in Columbia back in the 1970s. And we've grown to the point now where we have about 4,000 trained members located in block groups, or what we call block groups, neighborhood watch groups throughout the city. The whole idea of the concept is that the police can't be everywhere at the same time. And if you have trained citizens who know how to observe and report suspicious activities and how to get that information to the police, is very valuable. As I've heard the chief say, we're the eyes and ears of the police department. And so we, at that time when we organized, we formed a not-for-profit corporation, and I'm on the board of directors of that. We're totally independent of the city. but we affiliate with the police department, and they give us our staff support and the training we need and the technology. So it's been a great relationship, and but we're just, as the chief said, we're just a part of community, but we at least have, as I say, almost 4,000 trained volunteers out there that are eyes and ears for the police department.
Right. So that's one thing. And then in terms of like officers on the streets, we've heard a lot about that. Chief Burton, how do you view that, the role of the police officer out on the street developing community?
There's several different models that police community relations is practiced under. And the one that I advocate is one where every employee in the department is involved in community policing. And so even the person working the front desk needs to understand how the department is approaching problems from the citizen's perspective. And the officers on the street are actually our first line. I encourage officers when they see a neighbor or someone in their neighborhood where they're patrolling, mowing the grass on Saturday morning, for instance, stopping, introducing themselves, letting them know that I'm the officer working in this area during this time of the day, and handing out business cards and creating those relationships at the street level. The other model that's practiced and that we're currently doing in Columbia is having a community services unit that consists of 3 or 4 officers that we hold responsible for that. So I hope to move toward a more global community policing effort where everyone in the department is involved.
Right.
And so that's something we have planned.
So a question on that for you, Nathan, I guess, is how there are certain parts of the community where that might or might not be a successful response, I suppose, that if a police officer stopped somebody who was doing whatever in their front yard and said, hey, I'm the police officer for your neighborhood, that might not get such a friendly reception. What can you say about that in terms of the community response to a police officer? There's trust involved there. There are some other issues that come up. What would you say the response might be to that?
I'd actually be very supportive of that. I remember growing up here in the First Ward when police officers used to ride through the neighborhood. They would stop and give Kansas City Chiefs football cards out. And so there were times in which elder residents would grandmother would take her grandson to the police department and would flag the officer down and say, my grandson stole a 5-cent piece of bubble gum, because those relationships had been established. And in those days, you had those type of relationships, and we've gone away from that, as the chief said, and he's interested in bringing that back. And so I disagree. I think that we would actually be very supportive of something like that, as opposed to a young kid, the only time they see or have any interactions with a police officer is when they're taking someone to jail. I think it'd be very fruitful and productive, right, in predominantly minority areas.
Right. And so to take it to the next step then, what would that look like? How ought it be implemented if we were going to do something like that in this community?
Almost exactly like you said. The bicycles, riding through Douglas Park on bicycles, through the public housing areas, having an opportunity to have just some general conversations to say, hey, we're more than people to just take you to jail. We also protect you. We're here to serve you. And so just being cordial, being respectful, just being human beings.
Mm-hmm.